vast wasteland of entertainment where radio has become obsolete stands an embittered man teetering at the edge of sanity. With help from radio friends, he's about to embark on a global mission that would change the course of history as we know it. Broadcasting live from the secret studios on the banks of the Brandywine River in Delaware is Mitchell K.C. Hill. And up to the Great White North in Vancouver is Alexander Knight.
All right, here we are again with another podcast of The Last Angry DJ. It's such a pleasure to be here. And one of the cool things about this program today is that according to Apple, 13 consecutive shows means that you've made it. So we are at 13 consecutive shows. We can give ourselves a big hand. My name is Mitch Hill. I'm a former disc jockey that used to be on the radio back in the 70s. And I'm the so-called Last Angry DJ because things aren't the same way that they used to be. But the gentleman who represents what's going on in today's world of streaming podcast is our producer, Mr. Alexander Knight. Alexander, what's happening?
Good to be here, Mitch. And I am not a Last Angry DJ or a DJ, but I did waste 2 years of school and $20,000 and decided to not do anything with that training whatsoever. But I'm happy to be here. I'm not bitter at all. Well, maybe I'm a little bit bitter, but thanks for being here. This is the show where we talk about the broadcast industry and speak to broadcast luminaries and also get both perspectives of people who have been in the industry for many, many decades, and also from the other side of things, people that are a little bit younger that are just starting their career in broadcast. We also talk about technology and anything adjacent to the broadcast industry as well. And we would like to invite you to our community to carry on this conversation while the show is happening and also after we're done. And the best way to do that is to join our Discord server. I'm going to put up a QR code that you should be seeing on your screen there. So if you just take your camera up to that, you will be invited into our community, and that's the best place to carry on the conversation. But for now, back to Mitch, because we got a special guest this week.
Yeah, Alexander, first of all, you're not getting older, you're getting bitter. Is that what you were just saying? Something to that effect. Alexander represents the other side of the spectrum. He's the younger, more millennial-connected individual. So it's okay for me to be completely like a fish out of water when I'm referring to pronouns and things like that. Alexander is here to help me. But anyhow, we are very blessed to have here in our special 13th show a very, very well-known Philadelphia personality and radio guy from WMGK 102.9, the great Andre Gardner. Congratulations for being here, buddy.
Oh, thanks for having me, Mitch. And my goodness, 13, my lucky number. Great to be here.
It's great. And Andre is probably the nicest guy that I know in the broadcasting business because he's genuinely happy about being in the position he is. He does afternoon drive at WMGK. He always sounds upbeat, always sounds happy, takes the time with his listeners. He does all the things that I didn't do, which is probably why I'm not back on the radio, that he does so very well. But Andre, you've got a long, long history of getting to where you are. How did you start out in radio?
Well, first off, thank you for those very kind words, Mitch. I appreciate that. I'm living the dream, basically. I'm 63 years old, and there was a day in August 1970 that I visited my brother, Bill Gardner, who was the DJ here in Philadelphia, several stations, WIBG, WFIL, WMMR. I visited him at Wibbage at 117 Ridge Pike. It was like Saturday. He's like, come on down, see what's going on. I walked in there, and it sounds so cliche. I was there 30 seconds. Light bulb went off in my head. That's exactly what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I watched him in the back of that studio. I watched a guy walk in who I was going to mention a little later on. You reminded me of, looks-wise, John Records Landecker. You kind of look a little like Landecker.
Yeah,
and Landecker walks in the studio, and they start talking and BSing about music. And I'm watching the songs play on the turntables, the Rusco Studio Pros. They had an engineer who only operated the mic. It was a weird thing, that these weird push buttons with no pots. It was just wild. And there I was where Wibbage was born. And I'm telling you, it lit a flame in me that has not gone out since that day in August 1970. So my brother Bill saw the passion I had. My father, who was an engineer, KYW, for 30 years, TV side, not a lot of broadcast on camera, but all behind the scenes. One day I walk into our spare bedroom in Willingboro, New Jersey for Christmas, and they've set me up with a whole radio station rig.
Oh,
and
that's
not a
cool.
PlayStation. This is what I know now is a pirate radio station for a 10-year-old, 11-year-old kid that broadcast at the time, very small amount, maybe a quarter mile, a half a mile, or whatever. But over the years, that became my training ground. As we moved to different places, we got more powerful. We had a mile radius by the time we moved to Medford Lakes. I mean, I was living the dream as a 14, 15-year-old. Kids were going out and getting in trouble. I mean, I was not without a little trouble now and again, but I had a working radio station in my spare bedroom that operated in the summertime, sometimes 16 hours a day. I had friends come and do shifts. I'd go down to the pizza shop while my friends did shifts. I'd, air check them. I'd listen on the way, do a signal check. And to me, my dream was always to get on the radio. But if that had only been what I had done in my life, I'd have been content. The fact that I actually got on the radio using a tape from that radio station to get my first pro job was just blew my mind. And here I am doing this every single day. So how can I not be excited and love what I do every single day? This is a joy and it's a privilege.
Yeah, and you're living the dream, which is really cool. And I don't know how anybody can keep that kind of level of joy in their particular profession as long as you have. Now, I bumped into you a few times over the years, and it just the fact. First of all, you instantly knew who I was, so that kind of threw me a little bit. But not many people. My expertise goes way back into the '70s of being on the air at WFIL. And it was at a time when Philly radio, it was like WFIL, WIBG battling it out. And then it was Wi-Fi 92, and then MMR with their Marconi experiment, and things went on and on. Believe it or not, I did work at your station for a brief time. When I left town, went to San Antonio, Texas, and came back, I was hired at WPEN when Gardner Media bought them and turned them into an oldie station. And they were simulcasting WPEN on WPEN FM, which actually was WMGK, as you probably recall. Absolutely. And I lasted 3 months. I couldn't take it. I couldn't play doo-wop radio oldies. I told them, I said, look, if I have to play Walter Brennan and Old Man River one more time, I was 17 years old doing afternoons there.
You're in the rock, Mitch.
I told Julian Breen, I said, look, if I play that again, I'm dead. I'm out of here. He said, you'd quit your first major market job in radio? I said, you damn tootin', I'm out of here. I go back to WAMS in Wilmington. So, it's great about your story about pretending radio. I guess in a sense you were doing radio in your home. It was great of your uncle or your brother to build that studio for you. That's how we got our chops in the beginning. Even if we just talked to ourselves, I did the same thing. And I actually built an FM station at our high school in the Sanford School in Hockessin, and we got a Class D educational FM broadcast station. Got our start there. And, all of us, and I think I'm speaking for you, wanted to eventually aspire to work at a big Philadelphia radio station. In my case, it was FIL. Meanwhile, I was working at WAMS here in Wilmington, which was a thing back then. And I just did it over and over and over again. And I used to send the tapes out and all that kind of stuff. Where was the first commercial station that you got a job at?
That was WPST in Trenton. I was 16 years old. It was July 77. I had just joined a bowling league with my friend Blaine because we really weren't sure what we were going to do over the summer. So we like bowling. Let's join a bowling league. So it's him and me, two 16-year-old guys, and a bunch of 50 and 60-year-olds bowling on, 3-4 days a week. One day I come home and my dad goes, hey, there's a guy I work with at KYW named John McCurdy. John McCurdy's a weekend guy at WPST. He knows about your station, and he hears there's an opening at WPST, and would you be interested in auditioning and sending a tape? And I'm going, Dad, I'm 16 years old. They're not going to hire me. What are you talking about? She said, no, he said to send it along. So I sent the tape to Tom Taylor, the program director of WPST, thinking that would be the last I'd ever hear, or I wouldn't hear anything. And sure enough, a week later, I get a call from Tom Taylor asking me to come in and talk. And I thought, all right, he's going to see what I'm all about. He's going to see I'm a complete fraud. I'm a teen. I don't know what I'm doing. And he's going to throw me out of his office. And then he hires me. He hires me to do 1 to 7 a.m. on Sunday at WPST. So, I mean, I went with my friend Steve drove me because I didn't even have my license at this point. My friend Steve drove me there. I am on cloud nine. We're eating pizza. We're laughing. We're just celebrating my shift. I couldn't believe it. I had my first show, which my brother taped for me, and I have forever. Did 2 more weeks, just starting to get into the groove. Tom Taylor was a wonderful program director, so nurturing and encouraging and motivating. And then I get a call from Tom Taylor, and he says, "Hey, I got some bad news for you." I immediately thought, I'm done. I'm getting fired. I don't know what I did, but I got fired. He goes, "I got to take you off the air." But why, Tom? I mean, you were telling me things were great. He goes, I forgot New Jersey has child labor laws.
Oh, no.
Kids under 18 can't work after midnight. I was like, oh my God. I'd been doing this, I think, 3 weeks. And I'm like, that's the end of my career. I'm done. 3 weeks. And he goes, no. I'll get in touch with you. We'll get something will pop in the daytime. I'll get in touch with you. And I thought that was the nice, blow off. But sure enough, a man of his word, he called me, I don't know when it was, late August, and said, a Saturday afternoon shift opened up. Would you like it? And that was it.
Wow.
Mitch.
What a
That
great
was
air
it,
shift.
almost 47 years ago, with the exception of maybe 2 months, I've worked every single day on the radio.
And Andre, at that point in your life, you would have paid PST to work there, because that's the same way I got into WAMS, is I was like doing the all-night shift running religious tapes on Sunday mornings. And to me, to sit in that room, and I was like, I am the king, And I would call friends up, and I'd say, are you listening to WAMS? Well, they're playing some kind of religious program. I said, watch what happens to the audio. Whomp! And I'd turn it up and down just to show them that I had the power to turn it on and off. Nobody cared. But to me, just giving the weather forecast between songs, but to have an actual shift all night while you were in school, that is the bomb. Being able to do that.
I was lucky. It was a summer that I was doing the overnight show. July 17th, 7/17/77 was my first shift on PST, and it lasted until the first week of August when they pulled me off. And then by the time I had gotten back to school for my senior year, I was doing daytime work on Saturdays, and it was a little more manageable at that point. But that's just so funny you said that. Were you running Powerline on WAMS with Brother John Rivers?
Powerline and the Apollo show and Scott Ross and was it Jim Borders was the Powerline host,
funny.
the guy from TM.
But you didn't care. You're running stuff on the radio that people are listening to, and that's what I loved. I loved when I was at Wibbage with my brother, looking at that Martha and the Vandellas 45 on the turntable, going, "How many people are listening to that right now? They're grooving on this record because he played it for them." And that always got me juiced up.
Weird when you say that is that when I think of an oldie, when I play them on my stereo behind me, and I hear the song, if it's a top 40, 45 or whatever, I see it in my head. When I think of, like when you say Martha and the Vandellas dancing in the streets or whatever, I can see the Tamala disc spinning on the turntable. I mean, I don't have to, it's just there. It's stuck in my head whenever the song plays. So everything's connected by radio. So you can see that we both still have a fun thing. And the other cool thing, like I just have to say this, that's similar between us is that I was on WAMS at the time was a big top 40 station here in Wilmington while I was still in school under another name. I was using the name Bobby Dark, and I didn't let on the first year because that was like my junior year in school that I was on the air doing swing shift and weekends on WAMS, and they had no idea this guy with a pencil protector, goofy looking kid that was introverted, that never said much, was the DJ that was the young DJ on the local station. So to me, that kind of took me out of myself to have that personality and do that. So I don't know if you had the same kind of relationship with yourself as you came out of yourself, but it contributed to my personality. So congratulations.
No, thank you. And I do feel that way. I used a fake name a couple of times, only when it was given to me. I was Mo Hawk on I-92, one of the first new wave stations in Philly. I'm like, Mohawk, really? Yeah. So I got to have a fake name. And then I did a couple of sly shifts for friends on, fringe stations who needed a quick shift under fake names. Like I did a shift at WMGM for my friend Mark Dedina. I was Bill Foster. So I did stuff like that. But then you could sort of go out of yourself and sort of transform into this character or just a different persona. But it took me a long time though to drop I don't even know how to describe it, the wall that I had between truly communicating who I was into this microphone. And it wasn't until I came to MGK that I felt comfortable enough to be I'm a goofy guy, to be my goofy self. I was always reserved, always holding a little back, And I think that served me well the last 22 years at MGK. Is just, I am who I am. When you meet me in person, this is who I am. And I love doing it. I love doing it.
And what's neat about that is that back in the early days, even before 77, when you went on PST, being on the radio always meant that you spoke with a radio voice and you spoke from Mount Olympus and you spoke out to the audience. Like when I was at FIL, it was like, famous 56 WFIL on $1 million weekend. You don't talk like that in conversation, but that's what they taught you to be in radio. So it took me a lot of years to get to the point where I could be somewhat conversational. But still, I'm stuck with the radio voice from the 70s. I'm glad you made the transition. I'm still there. And when I go out to eat with my friends or neighbors, I say, would you please pass the gravy? It's just like, it's tough. It's tough to break out of that because that's the way we were trained. But radio today is, as you said, keeping it real, more conversational, and you do that brilliantly. It's nice to listen to because you recapture so much of the trivia and knowledge of the musicians because you've met a lot of them and you've talked to a lot of them. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with the faces and voices that are on the records that you play.
Well, at first, I do want to say that even though you said you had your radio voice, when you just did that, I totally geeked because I listened to you as Casey Hill on FIL. So as soon as you did that, I flashed back to hearing you talking up Undercover Angel by Alan O'Day or something.
Or Don't Be a Hero.
Recurrent. Yeah, Billy Don't Be a Hero is great FIL tracks. But yes, that is certainly a fringe benefit of being on the radio here for 42 years and also working at 44 years and working at major market stations is you get a lot of exposure to big names. So I have met just basically my dream team of rock stars. There's a couple that I never got the chance to, but the one thing I always say is, and this is the God's honest truth, and it's not because I'm a super fan, out of everyone I've ever met, the nicest one is Paul McCartney.
Oh, that is cool.
Nicest one. He remembers what it was like to be a fan, stand outside the door waiting for Bill Haley, maybe get an autograph, maybe get a wave. Never forgot it. He's the first musical billionaire in the UK. They just said it this week, but he's still a down-to-earth guy who takes public transportation. And just don't ask for a photo. Just don't ask for a photo, and you're good.
And you are a Beatles aficionado. Used to have a radio show that was syndicated, and also you're the go-to guy whenever somebody's in town or somebody's available to talk. I think you just talked to Ringo Starr again just like a week ago on your show.
Yeah.
These guys got to know you by name by now. They got to know who you are, right?
Well, it's weird. It's weird. The second time I met Paul in person, when he walked through these curtains down in Atlantic City, when what I thought was going to be a phone interview turned into an in-person interview. So my heart's pounding, wasn't quite prepared. And he walks through and he goes, "Andre, how you doing?" But his PR guy, Jeff Baker, was right there. And I know he went, "His name's Andre. Hey, Andre, how you doing?" But I don't care. I geeked on that. I just got off on the fact that he said that, and that was really cool. Ringo, I'm to the point where a lot of times if it's a one-on-one conversation, will bust my chops. So that's always when you know you're in the club, which is nice to know. He's like, "Oh, Andre, you're still employed over there, huh?" Or stuff like that, goofing on me. It's good. I love it. I just love it. I can't believe I get to talk to my heroes. I have 2 interviews coming up with Carlos Santana, legend, who one of the greatest interviews you'd ever want to do because you say, "Carlos, how's it going today?" And there's your first 15 minutes. He'll expound on the most wonderful things. And then John Lodge of the Moody Blues, who's also coming to town, another one of my heroes I've never spoken with. I'll be having that interview coming up. So that's part of the dream come true of what I do every day.
The neat thing about these classic rock artists is that they're still with us. It's amazing. And some of these guys are in their 80s, maybe pushing their 90s. And the fact that we can still have a conversation with them about what the good old days were like is amazing. And the fact that it's as popular today as it ever was as a format that you can hear on the radio. I mean, every market has a classic rock station. It's a safe format to play because it's familiar music that most people have some kind of relationship. But it's also being rediscovered by younger folks more and more because it's about the opportunity to hear the style and the ability of these artists to play their music in a much more raw and unadulterated format than today's all syncopated, homogenated Alex, I'll have to ask you, the recording process of working on a Pro Tools system is a whole lot different than being in a studio with a 4-track tape machine on Abbey Road recording Sgt. Pepper's. It's just a whole different. You really had to have the chops to be able to make it work.
That's very true. I mean, in my case, when I was a teenager, my first foray into recording was actually recording on one of those Tascam Portacapture, to actual cassette tape, which was you would have 4 tracks, 4 channels going to cassette tape. So that was my first experience before I even got a Pro Tools rig, which was much later. That was the early 2000s. My first Pro Tools Digi 001 rig before Avid bought them, they were called Digidesign. So that was my first foray into recording. But you're right. I mean, when you're working with analog 2-inch tape, I mean, there's a much higher skill set for sure to work with it, to operate the machine and to be able to cut the tape and to edit tape as well.
Andre, do you think music today, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot here, music today just doesn't leave room to showcase a great guitar solo or drum solo, or they just don't leave room in songs anymore like they used to, and they don't have the hooks that we used to listen for that were so very popular? Maybe that's why people are kind of gravitating back towards classic rock.
I wonder. I think music today speaks to young people, popular music today, just like it always has. And it speaks to my daughter, for instance, who's 25, and she does like classic rock. She loves Cream. It's like, Badge is one of her favorite songs. Fleetwood Mac, things like that. She's discovering Bjork and Kate Bush and stuff like that. But she loves a lot of the newer stuff. It speaks to her, whether it's melodic or whether it's lyrical or whether it's a combination of both. I've always been a melody guy myself. So for me, the classic rock has always been the jams, the guitar solos. And then I started geeking and getting into the mixes and how the stereo spread was and things like that. So I don't necessarily think music of today is meant for me. There's certainly moments of it that I very much enjoy. Charlie XCX, I know, has a new album coming out. I've always been a fan of her and her songwriting. She can write a heck of a great pop song. And Taylor Swift, you can't deny, writes some of the best music out there. She wouldn't be selling all the records if she weren't that talented. So there's a lot of good stuff out there for the kids to enjoy. But for us, we're all about classic rock and the music that I still think speaks to young people today. Maybe sometimes it sounds a little corny, but it's true. To your point, the playing mostly is true. Yeah, they used to do punch-ins and they'd punch in vocals and things, but it was live musicians playing real instruments, sweating over analog tape. And speaking of analog tape, anybody who owns 2-inch analog tape, I was lucky enough as a 40th birthday present, my wife booked me Abbey Road Studios for the day. So I recorded there in March 2001. And you know how hard it is now to find somewhere to digitize a 2-inch tape? I got it sitting in, nice in the closet here, and no way to digitize it there. Anyway, another story for another time.
Yeah, the methodology of recording has changed quite a bit from the old days where you really played together. And now, like you say, it's all punch in and soloed, and I love these YouTube sites that they take a song that's a popular song from the 70s or 60s. It might be a classic rock, and they put all the solo channels. What do they call them, Andre?
Individual multi-tracks.
Yeah, individual tracks. I could solo them. And you would actually hear, I was just listening today to Steely Dan and Deacon Blues, where they were taking it apart with Don and Donald Fagen. And, you heard all these little tiny parts, and I was like, wow, I never heard that little synthesizer ding sound that they put in over the drums or whatever part. But it was crafted completely differently than it is today. Not necessarily bad or better, but technology has changed or contributed or conspired with music today to be different. And on my old ears, it just doesn't fit in. Of course, I don't still have my original Pro 4 AA headphones like you do. But
look at these babies.
Those are
lifetime
classics.
Lifetime warranty, Mitch. Warranty.
By the time, how often do they leak on you? Because mine used to leak on me all the time. I get vegetable oil all down my shirt.
That's the old school model, which they don't make anymore now because they realize, we've got to do something about that. So it's some sort of air compression that they use that is able to cup your ears properly and give you that incredibly loud noise. $9, you send them a check, they'll send you a new one, or they'll fix any headphone that goes wrong. I bought one pair practically my whole life. I have an interesting thing I want to add to you about your Steely Dan point is also remember at the time, Steely Dan were sort of criticized for being too perfect for their time. How they would, rather than be a band per se, they'd bring in 50 different musicians. They'd bring in different bands to record the songs to get it absolutely perfect. They invented one of the first drum machines called Wendell, which Roger Nichols, the engineer, invented on Hey 19 to be one of the first drum machines ever used on a recording because they wanted that syncopation. But that's just with computers, that's just the direction we're going. And as far as I'm concerned, whether it's music from the 1890s or from last week, if somebody wants to show themselves and sing to a vast audience or even in their bedroom into a microphone on a song, I'm fine with how it's made.
Alexander, do you have an opposing point of view?
Well, I got to argue with you a little bit on the modern music. Well, and while I have my own problems about modern music, the way it's produced and sometimes the way it's written, I do have to say, I think if you look back at the last 50 years, and I think there has and there will always be well-produced music with good hooks in the chorus that are going to be popular. My problem with a lot of modern day pop and hip hop music is that they rely far too much on autotune technology to the point where it became popularized as an effect, as opposed to just a surgical tool. Okay, I have a pretty good singer doing a session. Maybe they need a little bit of help and they don't have the budget to do 100 takes until they get it perfectly right. So you can use tools like auto-tune to kind of nudge notes in the direction so that you don't, almost, if done right, you don't even notice it. But my problem is it seems like every hip hop song has auto-tune on it, and I find it incredibly, I can't listen to it. I can't tell, what does that person's voice actually sound like? Can they actually sing? And pop artists use it too. So I don't know if these people can actually sing, and do they actually sing live, or are they just kind of mouthing the lyrics to a backing track too? So it's hard to tell who's actually a really talented artist these days, and that's my major gripe. That's my rant. I'll end there.
Does Cher really need an auto-tune on Believe? It was used as an effect. It wasn't used to fix a problem, obviously.
That started it all, didn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it feels like that was about the time that it was all coming out. And then it was like shirts that I had that said no auto-tune, things like that. But we've talked a lot about music here, and what's great about you, Andre, is you're authentic. And that's, I think, the secret sauce to your show on WMGK is you never run out of anything to, some tidbit, some background piece about the artist that we're talking about to share with us. And we feel like we're like there in the room with you while you're talking about somebody that you know personally because you've talked to them or information you've had. So, good on you for having the ability to inspire folks that way, because to me, that's what a disc jockey really should be doing. They should be doing that rather than giving the time and the temperature. Who cares? I can get that anywhere.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I gave the time and the temperature. You just more interesting things to talk about. Like you say, you can look at your phone and get all that kind of stuff. But I learn something new every day about an artist or a song or a cover version or a producer, and I get so excited I want to share it. And then I have all this information right at my fingertips to validate, of course, because you might hear something that you might not be sure if it's true or not. You want to make sure it's cool. It's just fun. It's just a fun time. That's what it's all about for me.
What's it like for you with the modern technology to be in a room which has changed dramatically from your early days at WPST to it is now, with a wide orbit computer in front of you sequencing things? How's that changed what you do? Do you have more time to think about what you're going to say, or has it relieved you from something, or do you miss having all that action going on between the songs?
Yes to all. It has given me more time, but at the same time, there have been so many instances, and I don't want to say which computer program it is because I've used several over the course of my career, but there are times when the software has failed me to the extent that it makes the on-air presentation very sloppy, It makes it sound like I've lost my mind in the studio when I'm in the middle of a song. It just stops and goes into a commercial, or I'm about to hit a song and it leapfrogs over a song and goes into another set of commercials. This stuff has happened in the past. And while it's much better now than it was, say, 10, 15 years ago, I still too long, particularly when you know what hits the fan. I long to have 2 turntables, an ITC triple deck, and 2 reel-to-reels to my right, just in case, because they failed me a lot less than the audio does now. We have this beautiful board in the studio. I mean, I have it on my Facebook page. It's a Wheatstone board, multi-channels. You can send anything, anywhere, anytime. But it's basically a $30,000 mouse because I'm just sitting there clicking the digital files one after another rather than queuing up the records and watching the thing fade up and doing that kind of stuff. But within that context, I don't operate on automatic. I have everything on manual, so I still do everything by hand. All the segues, all the sweepers, the commercials I'll let run, of course, like I did, back in the day. But I want to make sure to massage my show and make sure it's a nice, free-flowing presentation during the afternoon. I get some really good opportunities to do some really killer segues, and I love doing that kind of stuff. So I'll take the modern conveniences, but I'll also incorporate some of my old school technique to try to make it sound as good as I can.
How much control do you have over the music you play on your show? I know most stations, big stations, they have some consultant sitting somewhere saying, well, you must play this, and this in this order, and it doesn't allow your personality to come through. Do they give you some leeway there?
Well, they give me leeway to the extent that they know I'm quirky, and sometimes in the course of an afternoon, I'll go, oh, my God, does anybody remember it's Bob Marley's birthday today? For God's sake, can we play One Love? And 9 times out of 10, the music director, who I will badger, Tony Harris, will, yeah, put it on. But, I trust the consultants. I trust our program director and music director to give a flow of classic rock that is sound, that bounces all across the eras and tempos and is rotated properly. So we're not all playing the same stuff. We're not all playing a bunch of unfamiliar songs. Just, let's face it, you wouldn't want a radio station based on songs I program. You wouldn't listen to it because it's all over the joint. I'm playing A Little Kiss Each Morning from the Bostonians from 1925, right in XTC. So I mean, I could be, no one wants to hear that station. We need consistency. We need a good sounding classic rock station, and within the realms of the format, which, as I think you've mentioned, has been very successful for us over the last few years. I don't want to change anything. I want to keep doing that. But I want to be the salt and pepper on top of the music, just the seasoning that talks about the music, maybe talks about a show coming up, a broadcast we're doing where we get to meet our listeners. That's where we can shine. And may I add, meeting our listeners in local events is where we separate ourselves from Spotify and Sirius XM and all the other ways of hearing music where there's no interpersonal relationship. I'm meeting people every time I go out, and it's a joy.
Do people see you on the street and yell out, Andre?
They do, and that blows me away.
You're an easy-to-recognize guy, shall I say.
Obviously I got the face for radio, which obviously helps my cause. I'm a unique, quirky-looking guy. But what blows my mind is sometimes I'll be in the checkout line, and I'll say, all right, 1934, thank you so much. I'll go, you're Andre. You're the guy. I go, man, you got some good ears. I can't believe it. How'd you know? And they go, well, I listen to you every afternoon. You help me drive home with the songs that you play. And that's such a joy. That's such a pleasure to meet people face-to-face who listen to our station. That's why I wish I could do live broadcasts every day. But I know we don't have it in the budget anymore.
You're a Philly guy. You're one will say, who was the artist named Naz from Upper Darby, Pennsylvania that went on to big things? And you would know instantly who that artist is and the songs that they played.
Oh, my goodness. And the color of the vinyl on the original album was purple.
Blue.
I might add.
Oh, I thought it was blue. Sorry.
You're right, Mitch. It's blue on the first, purple on the second. Naz 2 was on purple. That's Todd Rundgren, Upper Darby's own.
Sure enough is.
And we were doing a Ringo Starr All-Star Band broadcast at the Tower Theater on Mischief Night one year. And Todd was a member of the All-Star Band, and we weren't sure. We didn't think we were going to meet Ringo. We didn't that night. Well, we thought, well, Todd's from Upper Darby. Maybe we'll see him walk down the street. Ha, 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 ha. Don't you know, we're outside, and who comes walking up that side street from the Tower Theater where the Waterford Inn is? But Todd Rundgren with a DeBruno Brothers bag, and he's got like his dinner, and he walks in. So a friend of mine just runs up to him. I take a few pictures, and we had a joyous time. That was cool.
We've got some questions coming in from our YouTube viewers. Alex, what do we got?
Yeah, so we have Marty Glenn in the chat asking, Andre, don't you miss playing the pop, soul, and bubblegum hits that you used to play on the top 40 CHR stations back in the day?
No, I don't miss them because I can play them anytime right here in my studio. I have a 300-watt amp, two gigantic speakers, and about minus 30 dB of compression, which is the way I have to listen to music, Mitch, as you might understand, being an AM/FM guy. I can't listen to music in my head without compression. So I can blast Daddy Dewdrop. I can do 10cc. I can do Anne Murray. I can do whatever the heck I want. I have a cloud hard drive with about 50,000 songs from 1950 to 2005 that I can access anytime that peaked in the top 40.
Daddy
So, no, I don't
Dewdrop
miss it because
would be
I do my own show.
Chickaboom, right? Chickaboom. Don't you just
Chickaboom.
love it?
And I'm so sick, I know the label. Sunflower. I'm a geek.
He truly is a radio guy, and you probably dream radio, and you probably eat and everything else radio. You know, what's interesting about the most curious things people are about radio people is about how things have changed, or have they not changed. Now, obviously, your headphones are the same, and you have learned how to be keeping it real, which is really neat. How has things changed for you just in the last 5 years being on WMGK? And by the way, congratulations on your contract renewal with Beasley Broadcast, one of those big boys.
Well, thank you very much. That was an honor to be to have a deal through 2026, which I'm very, very happy about. So you're stuck with me till then. But yeah, it's changed a lot. Like you said, Mitch, in the last 5 years, it's just been dramatic. I mean, you can go back when I first started at MGK at 2002. We were owned by a private company called Greater Media, a family-owned business owned by the Bordas family. They were wonderful people to work for. Peter Smythe was the CEO. And I just laugh at how different everything was, going down to the pricing that we would have. I was cleaning out a closet in my house a couple of weeks ago, and I found an MGK embroidered terry cloth robe, like the kind of robe you get at a high-end hotel when you come out of the shower. I mean, can you imagine they made them today? I mean, those days are over. We try to get bumper stickers and and pens when we can, but just the problem is the advertising has is switching to digital. We are trying to create a bigger digital presence within our company as far as articles and content that we write on our website and the station's websites. And that's going to go in tandem with what we have going on in terrestrial radio. So that's going to hopefully propel us into the future, because the future is digital. We're still trying to educate folks at the best way to take MGK with them, smartphones, smart speakers, and the like. And we're getting some good traction on that. But that's still not ubiquitous, nor is digital advertising dollars. Most of the advertising dollars still come from terrestrial radio. We're seeing, this sort of convergence and shift coming down the line that we're going to have to get our butts very, very digital very, very soon. So that's the biggest change we've had to make as far as that's concerned. And personnel. I'm going to be honest with you. There's less people doing more at all the stations. No matter whether it's us or Odyssey or iHeart, although I'd like to think they're doing a lot more thwacking than we're doing. We did have a reduction recently, but that's very sad to see people work their tails off that gave their all every single day, and then there's a downsize or a reduction in force. It just breaks your heart. Even though, as I do tell some people, that's been going on in radio for years and years and years. People, you're not truly a radio pro if you haven't been canned a few times. I've been canned twice. And that's enough for me, thank you.
And what's strange about that is that it's part of the deal, is that you're only as good as the last show you did or the last ratings period. And people that were in radio were prepared to, I had inflatable furniture in a Porsche 914. And when I was told it was my last show, I just go over and took the furniture, threw it in the back of the car, and off to San Antonio, Texas, for another couple of years until they got tired of me there. And then I came back to Philadelphia. It was it's a crazy business. It's not the same as it used to be. There are good things about it and there are bad things about it. But the shame of it is that it's not a great career builder that it used to be. It's good if you learn all of the things that they're available to you, whether it's all kinds of media, production, commercials, sales, engineering, because it's not even being an engineer anymore. It's more being a computer expert. If you are able to transition with the business as it continues to move forward, I think you'll do well. You've certainly done a good job doing that. I mean, why would they sign a extended contract with you if they thought that you were some old washed-up disc jockey that was trying to make ends meet and be consistent? I think I could kill it if I went back on the air, but only in the context of my cultural reference points. So I couldn't stay, consistently in touch like you do, and you do that well. I think you do it because you're very much in touch with your listeners.
We have the greatest listeners in the world, and I would take exception to washed up, because I think you could pop on a pair of headphones, come into our studio, and be at home within 2 breaks, because it never leaves you. You know that. I mean, once you're in radio, you could do it anytime, anywhere, under any circumstance. This is a great story, if I could just divert real quick. Our market manager is Joe Bell, and he's been our market manager for a number of years. Great guy. And he had just started at our station as the market manager, and he was there on a Saturday just doing some work in his office all the way down the hall. All of a sudden, the computer system on the station goes kaput. Now, every other market manager would have gotten on the phone, "Get engineering over here." Not Joe Bell. Joe Bell throws his pen down, runs down to the studio, and tries to figure out how to crack open the mic and do a break, because he did radio like twice in his career. So that never left him. I love that about him. That's the thing that enters us like a virus and never leaves. It's that radio passion, knowing what to do. That's what I'm saying. Even though there's all this digital stuff in there, you know your way around the studio in minutes, because it's all the same, just a digital version. That's all it is. I'm hitting segues on a touch screen rather than, holding the 45 and slip queuing it and turning up the pot, like we used to do. But at FIL, even in 77, you had engineers doing all that.
It was a real pleasure to have them, because they really were responsible for the consistency of sound that FIL, which was very produced, every single little cue was spot on. And these guys were really good. They were professionals. And I found out real quick as a young 18-year-old working at FIL doing nights that if I didn't get along with my engineer, I didn't sound that good on the air, because they just had the ability to delay that a little bit, or when I was doing coming out of the news and the back timing wasn't quite exactly right. But you're right. The neat thing about the engineers is sort of what the neat thing about the technology today was, that I was faced with a situation where I went from a regular radio station here in WAMS in Wilmington to FIL, and all of a sudden I didn't have to worry about all those things like what's the next record, what commercial do I got to play, and you're moving around a lot getting ready for the next break coming up. And at FIL, you just record 2, jingle 3, do a segue, I'll talk over the intro, and I would just pop the mic and do my FIL thing. It gave you more time to think about what it was I was going to say or what I would do. And to be honest with you, I kind of blew that opportunity. I just got kind of lazy and kind of goofed off a little bit between the songs. I didn't realize what great opportunity. I'm sitting in the same chair that King George Michael sat in doing his show that we grew up listening to, and I'm trying to do his gig. No way, I couldn't measure up. And all those people that stood before you. But the thing that I maybe you get this, I suffer from a radio PTSD. I haven't been on the air for a couple of decades, and I still dream about being on the air somewhere, and I can't find the next record, or it's running out and I don't know what else to do, or I can't see the lettering to know what it is that I'm playing. And it really, really messes me up to the point where I even know in my dream, oh, this is that stupid recurring dream you're having. How are you going to deal with it? But it's like, it really gets me amped up, because radio people have this fear of dead air. You can't have moments where nothing's happening or people are wondering what happened to him. Where did he go?
That happened to me.
Taking a bathroom break?
I had a
what did you do?
Really bad dead air experience at a college radio station. I'm trying to figure stuff out, and our automation Windows computer just crashed, and there was zero redundancy. Okay, so there's nothing no other secondary computer to fail over. So there was dead air for like at least a minute, and the only thing I could do is like rush to grab a CD and pop it in the CD player. Just hit play and switch, but there was like over 60 seconds of dead air. The worst, just like that, that feeling where your heart like sinks down and this is all the color just rushes out of your face. It's the worst.
I got to run and get an Ambien as soon as that happens, and I'm probably going to have one tonight because we've talked about it. Andre, how about you? Do you have any experiences with that?
It's funny you say that. Yes, I'll tell you mine, but it makes me laugh because everybody who's been in radio has one of those. I did a broadcast last week with where Brett Hamilton of QVC showed up. He's an on-air host that does a lot of the music and the techie stuff, but he'd been on the air too as well. But that was before he got into TV. He's never had a TV dream where anything like the director screwed up or the camera was on, but he still has radio dreams. And it's just something about that. You're right when you say that need to not have dead air. I mean, I can't really talk about it fully, but as far as the ratings are dictated these days, dead air is not only lethal, but it means a 0 rating. So if you have dead air, it doesn't even count. So it's even more important than ever. And yes, the last radio dream I had was I was standing in the back of the old MGK studio on the 3rd floor, the air studio, and Debbie Cowton, who was our longtime midday DJ host, who's long since retired, is standing at the console where all the stuff is, turning around going to me, "Come on. Why aren't you? Come on, the record's about to end." And I'm walking, and I'm in quicksand, and I can't move.
Oh, no.
And my legs just keep moving and moving and moving. And I wake up in the cold sweat, and it just happens every now and again. And it's unique to our business. I mean, I don't know if other businesses have that. If people in other businesses have their inherent dreams, I don't know.
Well, we were a lot more in charge of what was happening back in those days. Now, no, you're right to point out FIL had engineers, so I could stroke out and fall on the floor, and the FIL would continue on pretty well. But if I was working at WAMS, where I was the only guy in the building doing the all-night show, and I'm segueing records and playing commercials, and if anything were to happen to me, like fall asleep or something like that, you would be in a huge amount of trouble. Why don't we talk just briefly about some crazy radio stories that people would never. I'll start it out with one. I was doing my early broadcast career of spinning Sunday morning tapes, where we were playing tapes, and occasionally we'd go to a live church service. And I'll never forget, apparently the remote control had shorted. The engineer had racked it up or something, and it pinched a 110-volt line. And I said, "It's 8:25. Good morning. Now we go for these inspiring words at Aldersgate United Methodist Church." And I reached over and hit the button and got 110 volts right at my arm. And I went, "Holy shit!" like that. And I'm like, I just sat there, and eventually the church service started live. I just sat there waiting for the hotline to ring, the bat phone, as we used to call it. I said, I'm sure as hell fired here at this point because I just said a dirty word on the radio. That's my funniest story to tell. And the next day I went into I sheepishly went into Bob Rich, who was my boss, and I explained what happened. And he said, "Don't worry about it. Nobody listens anyhow."
Nice.
That was his explanation. So
was that Bobby Rich,
kinda,
the B100 guy, San Diego?
No,
Bobby
it was
Rich?
Bob Rich and Seymour Duck, who worked out of Nashville. But there were a lot of Bob Riches, by the way.
Yeah,
and
good point.
so give us a great radio story, something that happened that your listeners are going to kick out of.
Well, I have a couple. I mean, being in business 44 years, you have a bunch of stories. When I was younger and more stupid, and worked at Wi-Fi 92, I was 20 years old. And of course, I was a young man working the night shift, which was 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. It was a dream for me, the night shift on a, excuse me, on your dream station. And you're playing to tens of thousands of teenagers. You're the hotbed of all the hot music. But I still had a nightlife. I still wanted to go out. And I'm on the air 6 nights a week, 7 to 1. And I'm like, oh, come on. So I found a plan. In the studio, we had 2 ITC triple decks. You remember those 3-deck cart machines, tape cartridges. They look like 8 tracks, but they played like this. Anybody who doesn't know what a cart is, they played one song or one commercial's worth of tape on each one. So you have to be switching each song. So I took the left bank of Cart Machines, and that's what I was doing live on the air on Wi-Fi. The right bank of Cart Machines, I was doing a completely different show in audition simultaneously and recording it onto a Revox, which, as you may recall, those Revox 10-inch machines could play back very high quality on 3 3/4. One of the very few decks that could do that because of the design, for whatever reason. So I was able to get 2 hours on a 10.5-inch reel of music simultaneously doing the shows and hoping that both didn't end at once. Because if both ended at the same time, I would sacrifice the one on tape and go live and like do a segue or something. So I had that scam going for a couple of weeks. I was able to go out. I went out, had dinner. I met friends. This is like late at night. I come back at the station just as the tape was ending, and then the next shock would be coming in. So one night I come walking into the studio. There's Liz Kiley, the program director, just standing in the corner like that. And she has a half smile on her face. And again, I thought, that's it. I'm going to get my things. I'm going to leave. And she just looked at me and stopped. She just broke out in hysterics. She goes, "What the F are you doing?" I got the big, I got the Big Mac in my hand and the fries and the soda. And I just copped to everything. I just told her what I did. No downside in doing that. No sense in lying. And she just said, "That is the most ridiculous, most creative thing I've ever heard. Don't effing ever do that again." And that was it.
Oh, that is a great story.
I got my hand
that's the
slapped
kind of
for
stuff that you see actors doing on TV, like in Play Misty for Me or whatever. He would just rack up the tape and leave the studio, and it would roll.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us would never get away with that. It would be too afraid.
Oh, God, I thought it was sunk. I thought it was sunk. And then one other one. One of the stories was at PST doing the overnight show. Once I turned of age, I could work the overnight show. We had a 3 o'clock album side feature where you could track an album side in its entirety. So I had Eddie Money's album, debut album, ready to track. And PST was actually in Princeton, not in Trenton. And there was a Wawa, even back then in 77, about 4 minutes away. So I was able to start the record, run down to the Wawa, get myself a sandwich, and come back in time for the record to be finished. What I didn't do was listen to the station on the way back, which was a stupid thing to do because about a minute and a half into track one, it skipped. And it skipped for 20 minutes until I came back, ran up the stairs, heard it skipping on the speaker, and just went into a panic, dropped my hoagie, ran up, and I, again, thought I was done. No one called. No one said a word. The things we do as a stupid kid.
Amazing. Funniest thing that we did at WAMS is we used to like to pretend we were at a big station. And when we signed off, on Sundays, we used to turn on the auxiliary transmitter into a dummy load, and we'd pretend we were at LS or KHJ, and we'd play the jingles, and we'd drop F-bombs and go crazy. Well, all of a sudden, the request line starts ringing. This is like at 1 o'clock in the morning, and the guy says, "Wow, I like the new format change." I'm like, how the heck? He said, "Yeah, I can hear you kind of coming in kind of lower than normal, but apparently the dummy load actually put a signal out to like a mile or two." And so we were totally busted. So great story. Again, waiting for the hammer to drop.
Yeah.
Boss said, so what? Nobody in Greenville cares.
We were younger then. I would never do such a thing now. Never consider it.
Yeah, that's what he said. But maybe you've done some things to stretch the. We used to do crazy stuff where we used to, when we were playing records, we used to, like it was a false fade on a song or whatever, or we'd fade the monitor out while the jock was in the bathroom listening to the hall monitor, and the song would end, and they'd come running out with toilet paper sticking out of their pants or something. Just crazy stuff that we used to do, and we used to have fun doing. And nowadays, it's not quite so easy because the automation probably would pop in and take over for you. But oh man, some of the things that we did are just. And you know what? Here's again. This is the thing I promised never to do, but I'm doing it. When I started doing the podcast, is waxing too philosophically about the old days and the crazy stuff we did. Because, Alex, how do you feel about all these great old stories that we're telling? And you're a young guy saying, so what's the big deal?
I love hearing this stuff, and I especially love. Now, to me, it humanizes people when they make mistakes, right? Because it doesn't matter what level of success you've achieved. Everybody at some point has made some mistakes, and hopefully, you've learned from that. That's how you grow. That's the only way to really grow and get better at your craft. But I really particularly enjoy pranks because we've talked about that on past episodes with guests. I know, Mitch, you've talked about stuff like that. Tom Ferguson had a great one. Andre, have you ever played a prank on someone in your entire career? Anything that stands out, or maybe somebody just pranked you at the station?
Yes, I did. And it was something that I tried to do for a number of years. And we finally pulled it off in 2015, I think it was. Before MGK was a classic rock station. By the way, I love the meters below your on-air light there. They're actual real-time meters, digital meters. Nicely done. Anyway, before we were classic rock, we were soft rock. We were Barry Manilow, Lionel Richie, Barbra Streisand, England Dan, and John Ford Coley, all that stuff. And they were known as Magic 103, WMGK, with all the great soft rock jingles and all the great soft rock jocks. It was a brilliantly, as I'm sure Mitch will remember, brilliantly programmed radio station. I mean, it was one of the big, that and George Johns doing the KVIL hot AC format, and Bob Craig doing MGK doing the softer AC format. Those were the two standards by which AC stations were measured. It was successful for many, many years.
Was Dave Clare the PD back then for you?
It was Bob Craig.
Oh,
Bob
okay.
Craig was the PD through the 70s and 80s, at least during the glory years. And it was weird, too, because I'm not to get off on a tangent, but they played the Barry Manilow and Barbra Streisand, but then Craig would throw in Diamonds and Rust by Joan Baez or Have You Heard by the Moody Blues that were soft rock, but just way out there, but it totally worked. Anyway, I digress. I thought it would be fun, and this is something that radio people always try to do, and not everyone succeeds, and sometimes it can be an absolute disaster. We wanted to do something on April 1st for April Fool's Day. So I came up with the idea that for April Fool's Day, when I started my show at 2 o'clock, we were going to change format and go back to the old days of Magic 103. My PD I asked initially at the time said, no, I'm not taking a chance. Nah, we're going to do that. We're not going to do it. So we got a new PD, and I asked him, Bill Weston, and he said, I like this. This might be fun. So Tony Harris, the programming APD, found all the old Magic jingles on the 10-inch 2-track stereo master reels. We carted up a bunch of those. We came up with a playlist of England Dan and It's a Miracle and all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to do it for an hour, but Bill Weston and our consultant at the time said, let's do it for like 25 minutes or something. Let's see what happens. And sure enough, I came on the air at 2 o'clock and I instantly transitioned from Andre, the goofy rock jock with the up-tempo vibe, to the soft AC guy. So I'm on the air going, Philadelphia, you're back. It's Magic 103. And then we play a jingle and go into England and John Ford Cole. And then I come back and go, the Magic is back in Philadelphia. And of course, we're off the air. So I'm clicking off the mic and I'm dying 1,000 deaths. We have video of this off the air of us just losing it. And we pulled it off for 20 minutes. People were calling, crying that we're changing the format. People were enraged. I mean, it was just a classic moment. And then after 20 minutes or so, we came out of the stop set. That's right. I came into the stop set saying something like, and coming up next, we've got details on our first Magic Wine and Cheese Party hosted by Ray Koob coming up. So we come out of the stop set and we go, get out of here. You think we're going to do that? And then we go into Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who. And that to me was the best prank I ever pulled off on the air. It was safe. It didn't hurt anybody. It didn't cause panic. Sure, it bummed out a couple of people for 20 minutes. But after that, they all got the joke.
That is awesome. And the funny thing about it is that I think people are used to that happening to their favorite radio station, because a lot of stations, they wouldn't billboard that they were changing the format, because ultimately wanted to do, if they're changing their format, they always thought, well, some people will stay with us as we go to punk country or whatever the new format was. And that's an old radio joke.
I love that one.
And they would just do it, and people would scratch their heads and figure, all right, well, we just lost that station. But it's like that fourth wall. What kind of relationship do you have with your listeners? I mean, that's an important part of what you do, and especially your personality being what it is. You've got the regulars, you've got you got the haters. Haters will hate, as you said.
Sure.
How do you have a relationship with? Is it all over the request line? Now you got internet, social media. What do you do?
Well, that's that. it's a wonderful relationship we have with our listeners. And I think it's the format. I think the format basically is songs about love and having a good time and all that stuff. And it's produced some of the coolest, most interesting people I've ever met over the course of my career, whether it's at live events or concerts or what have you. It was actually that relationship that caused us the most amount of concern when we did the April Fool's prank, because we didn't want to ruin anyone's confidence that we weren't going to be classic rock. Just a harmless prank, But our relationship with our listeners and audience is sacred. And that's why I just love going out, hearing stories, no matter what neighborhood we're in, hearing how the music has affected them, hearing where they're listening to us, where they take us along on vacation. I've watched families where I've met their young kid who's 3 years old, and now she's graduating college at 22. I've seen families and things grow up, generations, through our listeners, and that's touched me like you wouldn't believe. It's such a wonderful, wonderful group of people who listen to our radio station. I'm proud to call them our audience, our listeners.
What's the thing that you do on WMGK that gets the most response? I think you just did the Philly 500. And can you tell us what the number one song was? Because I didn't catch it. So
you just nailed it. That's our most successful weekend of the year, the Philly 500 countdown. And that is a countdown that is not fudged in any way, that is 100% decided by our listeners' votes at the time. And that's why we always say, you got to vote. If you have any problems with the countdown, vote next year for your favorite song and the song you didn't think made it. We have a listener named Laurie Conradi, one of our most dedicated listeners, shows up at every single broadcast I've ever done. I've always said, if I do a live show in Abu Dhabi, she'll come walking through the door going, Jesus, God, it's hot in here. But that's the kind of loyalty you can't pay. She loves Faraway Eyes by the Rolling Stones. That's her favorite song of all time. She voted every single day, and it made it on the countdown, like number 498, which was fantastic. What shocked me was the top three. Sympathy for the Devil, number one of all time. Nirvana, Smells Like Teen Spirit, number two. Talk about a sea change. Talk about how the format is evolving. That answers that question pretty clearly, I think. And number three, Unchained by Van Halen. That was so flipping cool.
Wow.
That our listeners made that number three. I love that song.
And what's cool is that some music, how do I put this correctly? I've told this story before, I'll say it real quick, is that I was on a plane once fairly recently, and I popped my iPod on, and I looked over, a young lady was sitting next to me. I mean, she was in her teens, and she had a CD Walkman, and she was listening to Pink Floyd. She had to be all of about 15 or 16 years old. And I said, what's up with the CD you're playing? She said, Pink Floyd, yes! And, what's cool is that I think, when I asked her, I said, well, what's the attraction? Because obviously you can pick anything you want. What do you like about it? And she said something very prophetic. She said that the album itself, you had to listen to the whole thing because it was a work of art meant to be listened to from one side to the other. How do you feel about that? It's like we're not doing music like that. Everything's kind of singles related. But what about concept albums, like especially Pink Floyd?
That's very cool that she said that because that was the goal, obviously. The band wanted people to hear it in one shot, which is why all the tracks segue together. But yeah, I don't think by and large, and I don't mean to generalize, I try hard not to generalize, but I think maybe the average music listener does not have the time, does not have the patience, does not have the wherewithal or just desire to sit through a 40-minute piece of music. We are being fed content in bite-sized bits wherever we go, mostly disposable, with a lot of videos and TikTok and all that kind of stuff. So just being able to sit down and track Sgt. Pepper in its entirety, or Dark Side of the Moon, or a Moody Blues album that doesn't segue, doesn't really resonate that much anymore. But man, you go anywhere, you walk all along, you see teenagers and young people everywhere with AC/DC and Pink Floyd and Beatles t-shirts everywhere they go. They're proud to wear these bands on their bodies. And I think that's so cool that the music speaks to them in their own way. I just love that.
What do you think has replaced a lot of those concept artists from classic rock? Has it been replaced?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure that there's is an equivalent, and there probably is, but I am so behind the times with current music, I must confess that a lot of stuff has passed me by. I listen when I can. Friends are constantly sending me new stuff. Hey, check this new great one I love. And I listen to a lot of it, but I'm still trying to find that alternate take of Who Are You by The Who that I could feature sometime. I world premiered a Police track last week on my show from the upcoming Synchronicity box set called Every Bomb You Make. It was the working version of Every Breath You Take with completely different lyrics. And it's going to be on the box set in July when it comes out. But I got my hands on it. So I shared it with our audience. And that's what I'm busy listening to at present time.
Do you think people are interested in hearing outtakes and demos? Like, I think I caught the Sting interview that you had. We were asking him about that. He said, yeah, there's going to be all kinds of other stuff on there, including some variations of songs that you may not have. Hearing something done a little bit differently. Are people like gobbling that up? Is that like the new thing?
I think there's a very specialized audience for it. Geeks like myself just eat that up. Being a longtime bootleg collector and collector of music, I would like every take of every song in multi-track form so I could listen to each individual channel and mix it. So the more the merrier for me. There's some artists that don't like that idea. Paul McCartney several times has come very close to putting out an album of all outtakes called Cold Cuts, Hot Hits and Cold Cuts. But both times he's gotten cold feet because his thinking has generally been, why should I release a whole album of things I didn't think were right to release in the first place? So there's a double-edged sword to that. But I think the hardcore collectors like myself clamor for alternate versions of all the songs on Synchronicity, or maybe a different mix, or maybe an instrumental version of or demo of King of Pain from Sting's home demos. Oh, I love that stuff. I absolutely love that stuff.
Back in 1977, when I was on FIL, it was back in an age when everybody thought maybe the Beatles would get back together. And it was a constant refrain because they hadn't been broken up that long. And then along comes this mysterious group from Canada. You're probably going to know who I'm going to say, TLADJ. That everybody was sort of spreading the rumor that this was actually the Beatles and Paul McCartney and the rest of the gang. It was just that the response that came from it and the instantaneous play that TLADJ got on the air. I think TLADJ is a variation of The Time the Earth Stood Still, whatever it is. That was the name of the character, TLADJ Barreto Nectu. But anyhow, I don't know if you remember that story. It was pretty weird.
Yes.
Weird thing that was going through.
Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft was the A side. Sub Rosa Subway was the B side. And these were guys who were Canadian fellows who were huge Beatles fans, who all had day jobs and used to pop into the studio in Toronto and slowly but surely and meticulously put this album together. It was years before it got released. And then it exploded, and Capitol, to their credit, same label as the Beatles were on, exploited it a bit and kept it shrouded in mystery. So a lot of people might have thought it was the Beatles, but it was very beautiful, very well produced. I think they did that at Eastern Sound in Toronto, as I recall.
And the Carpenters covered Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft. It was covered by the Carpenters, of all things.
Great
so
version,
something
too,
was
right?
going on. Yeah, it was actually really, really well produced. So, Alex, how do you feel about a group from Canada doing a pretty darn good Beatles knockoff?
I've never heard their music, so I don't know. I think
that's KLATU.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I've heard the name before, but I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. But it kind of seems redundant to me. I kind of get the whole romanticized. You want to see that you want to see your favorite band continue, right? Of course, and who wouldn't want that? But you've got all this great material. You've got all these great albums that the Beatles did. So why not just listen to that as many times as you want? I mean, if you're truly a fan of the Beatles, those songs don't get old. They're well written songs. So I don't really see the point in that. There have been other rock bands that have tried to capitalize on the success of other bands like Led Zeppelin. What's that other bunch of young guys in their 20s now that basically
Greta Van Fleet.
Yeah, they're super talented, but I just hear Led Zeppelin and I just can't get past that. So for me,
No, I think you raise a really good point about that. That's really, really true. There's a derivative nature to a lot of that kind of music, but like you say, it comes from longing for something we couldn't have. We couldn't have the Beatles, so we got the next best thing in this TLADJ, which was pretty brief, by the way. They didn't last long.
At the same time, there was that big clamor for the Beatles to get back together, and I'll never forget this. I was handed one day in a dark, it was very clandestine, from Murph the Surf, gave me a reel, and it was the Beatles live at the Hollywood Bowl before it was released. And this was a big deal, and we tracked the whole thing on FIL. And to be honest with you, I got into trouble because I said, look, I'm a big fan of the Beatles, but this is a horrible recording. It just didn't sound, I mean, had nice memorabilia, it was well printed, and it was great to hear some of their early stuff, badly recorded or otherwise, but I just didn't think it was measuring up to the level of the Beatles. And I mentioned it to Ringo Starr in a conversation, and he said, oh, that thing's horrible. Of course, maybe he didn't play on it, but it was pretty wild.
It was, and it was recorded in a really haphazard manner onto a 3-track machine by a fellow named Voyle Gilmore of Capitol Records in Hollywood. So he would have guitar and screaming fans on the same track. And it was just almost impossible to mix. But now with AI, and now that you're able to spectrally separate frequencies, when it was re-released a few years ago with Giles Martin doing the remix, that thing came alive. You could hear the individual instruments. You could hear the individual vocals. Oh, it was so well done. Very, very well done how they were able to do that.
How do you feel about the redo of the lost John Lennon cassette demo that the Beatles got together and remastered and spent quite a bit of time, came out with a plausible song?
It was nice now and then. There's a bit of closure, I think, with that song, how they had this triad of recordings that they wanted to finish, Paul, Ringo, and George. It was Free as a Bird, Real Love, and then Now and Then, which they had trouble doing before. I still, in my deepest heart of hearts, have trouble calling it the Beatles, only because, I mean, I know it's all 4 Beatles. There's no input from John on any of this. Just like I really have a problem with some of the remixes of some of the Beatles albums that are out now, because they had, really no say in where to place the stereo picture. So that's kind of my feeling on the subject.
Yeah, but I think the new Giles Martin mixes, to me, they sound just sonically so much better than, because the stereo, all the stereo stuff, like I was just not a fan. They when they transitioned from mono to stereo, they were hard panning things left and right because stereo was a new thing. But personally for me, and this is just my opinion, but I think the new Giles Martin stereo mixes that's how they should sound now.
And I think in a lot of ways, a lot of Beatles reissues are geared sonically toward young people. I think I was used to this sort of crazy mixing of vocals on one side and instruments on another side for many, many years. But what got to me, though, was not even necessarily how it was mixed, but the things that were omitted or the liberties that were taken without the decisions of the Beatles. And this goes back to 2009 when the remastered albums came out. A decision was made whereby little things in Beatles recordings that maybe were not sonically perfect would be removed. In Strawberry Fields Forever, right at the very end, in the last vocal where they say Strawberry Fields Forever 3 times, and there's a lead guitar part played by Paul that goes into all the orchestration. At the very end of that, he hits the pickup with his pick. And I've been hearing it in my head for 45 years. When they remastered it, they took it away. So now I can't hear Strawberry Fields the same way as a result. And I'm a loser. On the Beatles for Sale album, there's multiple instances where John Lennon pops the P on the U67s that they were using, and they cleaned all those up too. That's what I object to. I don't mind remixing it, but leave it the way it is. On the Giles Martin remix of Old Brown Shoe, there's an entire guitar line that is missing from the recording. And I don't know if that was an omission or someone made the decision, but it sounds horrible, absolutely horrible. And I find disrespectful to the legacy that the Beatles left when they were in that control room telling them how to mix the song.
Do you think
how did the remaining Beatles feel about that?
Well, if you ask them, everyone seems to be loving it, loving how it sounds. Ringo loved how it sounds. He thinks, and he's right, that the drums are more prominent in a lot of these mixes because using this AI technology and this spectral frequency manipulation, they're able to bring his drums a bit more to the fore, particularly in the early recordings where Norman Smith, the original engineer, would place the microphones a little further apart from the drums By the time Jeff Emmerich came in 66, 67, those microphones were right up against the drums. So they got these sort of tight sound. So it got rid of kind of that airiness. But there's just, I just have, I just have so many beefs with a remix, but that's being an arrogant purist, I guess. But as long as people like you enjoy them, like, who am I to judge it? Right?
Alex?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, it's long out of print now, but I think just technically speaking, as far as the panning is concerned, I think the new stereo mixes sound to my ears, how they should sound, regardless of what they've removed or whatever. But I still think that the Beatles vinyl mono box set is the best. Like that's how they're meant to be heard, because that's what they were done as. They were done as mono recordings, and there's a solidity to that mono mix that sounds great. So I still prefer that. I just think from a technical, putting on my engineering hat, how would you mix a modern day album, and you would do it the way that they did it on these new mixes. I'm not saying that that's the best way to do it for this old music, but it's just a technical thing.
No, I agree with you. And the Beatles mono vinyl is, to me, the standard. The standard. They took so much time and care with that, mastering it with all tube equipment. The engineer at the time was so freaked out about the conditions of the tapes while they were mastering it that he slept in the control room with the tapes, huddled up in with the tapes at Abbey Road Studios between shifts to try to, to make sure he had them in his hand and nothing would happen. But I mean, the result is just beautiful. Absolutely.
What was
beautiful.
the experience for you to be in Abbey Road Studios, maybe in the same mixing room with the master and mixing a Beatles original? What was that like for you?
That was insane. We did a goofy original song that my brother Alan and I wrote back in the 80s just to do something goofy. It was a 2-minute song called "That's a Fact." But the thing for us was more the experience than the song. But we were serious, and we went in as a 4-piece and put the songs together. But being in there, walking in for the first time into that room, Studio 2, where Sgt. Pepper was made, where my favorite album of all time, the White Album, was created. You walk in, and the first thing you do is you smell musty, because it's in a basement. So you're walking down these steps and it smells kind of musty. And then I just kissed the floor, and I walked all around. I went underneath the echo chamber, underneath Studio 2, where they have these logistically placed sort of cement pipes in there with microphones balanced a certain way. I mean, I couldn't believe it. And then the great thing for us when we recorded was we had the place to ourselves, because at the time, Studios 1 and 3 were closed and being outfitted for 5.1 surround. So the only functioning studio was 2, plus the penthouse mixing room. And so our date just happened to fall in there, and we had the whole place to ourselves. So we got to roam around Abbey Road Studios like maniacs, controlled maniacs, and just have the time of our lives. Have dinner in the cantina downstairs, specially prepared. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Did you pose on the cross street there with the Volkswagen in the background?
I have done that in the past in future shots, because I want to get the shot right. The key to posing is to go there very early on Sunday morning, right when the sun comes up, because there's nobody there and there's no cars. So I met my friend Ben Post there back in 2015, took the tube out on a Sunday morning, and we took pictures, had the whole place to ourselves walking across. But yeah, we took them that day. But for me, the payoff was having the pictures inside. That was even better.
Yeah, that was cool seeing that. Back in the day, back when I used to be on the radio, now, way back when I used to play Beatles records on the air, one side was in mono, the other was in stereo. I think they actually mixed the 45s specifically for mono playback and specifically for stereo, because we had things called center channel buildup and weird things that would happen that would change the character of the sound unless it was mixed specifically for that. My personal opinion, I love the old mono remixes. They sound great.
Yeah, we're all in unison on that. I mean, that's the way the Beatles were there, present when the mono mixes were done. Even going up to the White Album, the mono mixes were done with Beatles supervision, and in many cases, the stereo mixes were done very hurriedly, and not a Beatle was present. It was just George Martin and an engineer doing the best they could to throw these mixes together for stereo, which, at the time, 68 was still kind of a novel concept. So yes, the attention was always paid to mono. And that's why, as a collector now, I've pared down my vinyl collection pretty severely, but I collect 45s a lot more than I used to because of the fact that, as you mentioned, the mono mixes in many cases are different and made to sound punchier on AM radio. Because as you say, the stereo sometimes when you play that on a mono station doesn't quite have the same punch to it.
Yeah, and a lot of times the cartridges in the needle weren't necessarily monoed correctly. So if you played a stereo that was being monoed with the thing out of anyhow, lots of weird things would happen. I love the instructions they used to put on the Beatles used to put on the 45s. Play it loud. I just loved that. I just thought that was a great concept. There had to be a story behind that.
Right here.
Let's see. Yeah,
Play
there it is.
loud. That was a one-off thing that John Lennon did on the Instant Karma release in 1970. It was produced by Phil Spector, recorded at Abbey Road one crazy night with John, band, and a bunch of revelers from the local pub. And with Phil Spector producing it, John gave the instruction on the 45 to play loud. This is one of my Beatles collectibles, by the way, on Apple. It's a one-sided Instant Karma that's extremely rare.
Cool.
So yeah, that's funny you mentioned that play loud, and it is loud. It's a hot cut that they did. Harry Moss, I guess, probably did that upstairs in one of the cutting rooms at EMI.
Well, I'd love to see your passion for the music because I think that's the thing that's missing from a lot of radio DJs per se today is imparting that knowledge. And you work at a classic rock station and you have that classic rock knowledge to go along with it. So it makes it a very authentic program. And I wish we will be able to hear you forever talking about these because none of that information gets old. So it's been great having you here on the show. Alex, do you have any last things you'd like to say before we let our guest move on to his Beatle collection?
Yeah, just a few questions about we want to talk a little bit about the how you see the current state of the industry because we sort of touched on this earlier on, but obviously the entire industry for a number of years has felt a lot of major changes, consolidation, downsizing in staff, which is never a fun thing to experience. And that's not just in the United States. I mean, I've seen that here in Canada too. And, for every person that seems to say, oh, radio's dead or dying or not many people listen to it anymore, it's actually not true if you look at the numbers. So clearly there's still a lot of value in radio, but I wanted to get your opinion on sort of the how you feel the pulse of the industry is right now, and what is terrestrial radio doing to modernize, to survive? How are you appealing to a younger audience? Is there even a way to appeal to a younger audience, and what kind of things are you doing to keep engagement? Is it a matter of bringing in live listener questions? Because call-ins, I don't know how well call-ins work anymore. So I just wanted to get your sense of how you feel about that.
No, I think for us, it boils down to the music. That's always going to be the focus of our radio station at MGK as a classic rock station. As we can continue to see growth in some of the younger demographics. I mean, in our last rating cycle, I guess, I think we were number 3 among 18 to 34-year-olds, which I thought was incredible. But again, it speaks to the power of this music. So I think as long as we continue to present the music in a passionate way, as long as we continue to reach out locally through whether it's events or whether it's charity work. We have a Veterans Radiothon coming up in a while. We have a bonfire coming up in the fall that we do every year where our listeners get together. If you keep that kind of one-on-one engagement while at the same time playing great music, I think that's a recipe for success. And I think radio's problem has been that we don't sell ourselves well enough. We don't promote ourselves well enough. When you look at these, some of the upper demos, it's incredible the listenership that classic rock stations have, yet, and this is, I think a lot of the ad agencies are guilty of this too. They're so 25 to 54-year-old focused that they don't regard anyone over 54 as really having the muscle to buy, yet the ones over 54 are the ones with all the income. I always thought was a big disconnect for me. So I think radio, as much as we're embracing digital, which is inevitable in many industries, including our own, and will be the future, we still need to have to remember where our bread is buttered. That is through live, local engagement of music people want to hear, of giving them the charity events, giving them the information, giving them concert information, giving away tickets, doing all that stuff that makes a radio station what was good in the 70s, what still works today with all the little changes we've had. But I think we need to do a better job of selling ourselves. I think that's still something lacking.
According to statistics, radio still is very viable. I think it's just that it has to continue to be viable in as many ways as it can in order to survive, because there's so many different choices. And as you stated earlier, Andre, people are used to getting things in small little bits and bites now. They don't have the patience to hear an album all the way through, but they're going to listen for the short time that you have to talk about an interesting story about Fleetwood Mac or the Stones or whatever else that you're able to impart. And for that, we thank you for being relevant as a radio guy. I would have a hard time being that relevant if I was back on the air. By the way, I'd love to get back on the air again, just in case anybody's listening.
Let's talk.
And it would be, yeah, I'm gonna sneak into your studio sometime and
Anytime.
lock the door. I'm gonna lock you out, buddy, when you take a break.
Lock me out.
Take over control.
They're smart today. They don't put locks on the studio doors anymore.
Oh, well, it used to be fun. So thanks again, Andre. Appreciate it. Next week, we have a guest, Bob Bowersox. You may remember him from In the Kitchen with Bob on QVC. He is also a writer, in addition to being a cook and an actor. And he lives he splits his time between Philadelphia and Key West. He'll be our guest on the program. And Alex, tell folks how they can get in touch with us.
Absolutely. So you can get in touch with us by joining our Discord community. I'm going to leave the QR code up there for a little bit there. So if you just scan that with your camera, that's the single best way to get in touch with us and continue the conversation. You can reach out on social media as well. We're at The Last Angry DJ on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, all those platforms. You can also send an email the old-fashioned way, hello@thelastangrydj.com.
And lest I forget to say it, I know, smash the subscribe button, be a regular. We like to have as many people as we can. We just reached 13 shows, which means that we're going to make it. We've just reached that threshold, sort of like getting our first big music break to play in a club. We're going to last, so we're going to be the house band here for a while. So thank you very much, Andre, for being here on the show. I love the fact that we get to talk about the Beatles, about radio, and your headphones.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Mitch and Alex. It was a pleasure. Love chatting with you guys.
Thank you so much.
Look forward to seeing you on the radio, my friend. Alex?
We're good.
All right. That's it for our show today. Thank you very much for watching, and you can listen later on your favorite podcast location, whether it's Spotify or Apple or whomever. You can hear the whole thing audio only for those folks who want to hear things at twice speed. So I can talk really slow, so when you speed it up, I'll sound normal. But whatever you do, play it loud. Thanks again for your show, and we'll see you, folks.